What would it look like if you said, no, I'm not just going to... What would it look like if you said, no, I'm not just going to look at what I can do as a company. I'm going to look at what my company and other companies could do together with all these other players. And just give me some conjectures on what you think you could do, or where you would at least like to look at doing something.
So we've been looking at this problem both from a business lens, but also from that of government and infrastructure. And one of the realizations for us is that no one side can do this alone. Often the responsibility for this civil society thing sits with government. So there is a pilot that's just sort of being born, the risk of using the word pilot, in Mumbai with the State Bank of India, with Hindustan Unilever, Mumbai Municipal Corporation, and local civil society, very large residential societies, all coming together to figure out what is that business model that can make it possible for us each to play our role more responsibly in segregating, collecting, and disposing, as well as monetizing of our waste in a more sensible way. And I think if we make models like this work and replicable and scalable, then we're looking at solving a national grand challenge using the lens of business.
Many people don't know the damages which tuberculosis does to the Indian economy. In fact, we are a high burden country. We have more than 25% of the global burden lies in India. And what is worrying is there's a lot of resistance which is developing to the bugs of TB. So we work very closely with the government in terms of raising awareness about tuberculosis. We work with like-minded NGOs, to come and help us and the government, because you just can't leave this to the government. It's too big for the government to step in. So we get a lot of NGOs to see how we can diagnose, treat, and make these people productive and put them back into the society, because it's quite heart-wrenching to see some of the impact which tuberculosis can do. So this is just a thought which I wanted to share here, David.
As electric batteries and vehicles get into the ecosystem, I think what people aren't looking at is what do you do with disposed batteries, batteries that have reached end of life. We already have an issue with lithium-ion batteries in electronics, in consumer electronics, whether it's mobiles, whether it's laptops. The whole recycling value chain opens itself up to disruption and to open innovation. I think the entire value chain is something that really lends itself to various partners coming in at various points in time, very much like the plastic issue today. But it's an issue that's going to hit us 5 years from today.
The difference between high life expectancy and low life expectancy is the access to healthcare. Now the next move that we are pushing through again with the government is, what about the next 40 crores? So this 40 crores is fully subsidized by the government. In US, you have a mandatory employer-employee health insurance. The employer has to take that. Why not in India? No? Why should not be mandatory? Why should not be pushed to that level? Why associations should not have health insurance at the price which is won by a tender, which is 1/6 the actual cost of individual healthcare? Imagine if the next 40 crores comes through that gambit, and the money getting pumped into annually moves to $7-8 billion just from the private partnership, and then hospitals come into play. They start opening hospitals. It's viable to have hospitals in a village, not viable. Doctors come into play. The startups come into play. The whole ecosystem, my belief, give 15-20 years, the life expectancy of an Indian shall move the top 2 or 3 as the economy moves.
The question that comes up is, okay, you put up a small net house, let's say, or a greenhouse. And from an acre, you start getting 2 times to 4 times the kind of produce you are otherwise getting. The question that comes up is, what do you do with this? And that's where we run into a roadblock. We can do all that we need to in terms of either greenhousing and doing aeroponics or hydroponics and jumping up the productivity. But at the end of it, if the farmer doesn't have a market to be able to sell that produce, then he is back to where he was. So if one were to be able to tie up with, companies which can lift the kind of produce that you can actually generate, that would be a dream come true for me.
So we are here today to basically discuss something that is very simple, but at the same time extremely complex. because everybody seems to have an opinion on it and nobody seems to have a definition on it. This was what is called as ease of living. We have an architect, a government officer, a public opinion maker on this panel.
Where this Indian cities are, I think they have a long ways to go, both first to solve the current problems, which can be done with effort, focused effort, both government and private, but also plan the longer term things, which are a lot more difficult to achieve.
And what happens if we don't?
Well, if you don't, then I think particularly the public transport, which I think is the biggest issue that I can dwell on. There are so many issues, but if you choose one, that if you don't do, it leads not just to chaos, but I think it may choke the cities completely. Because even any major city in the world without public transport, with a population of 5, 10, 15, 20 million people, it cannot exist, it cannot survive. No amount of roads will solve the problem. No amount of, any other fixing of things you do. You take major cities, London, New York, or Hong Kong, or whatever, any of the major cities, if they did not have the public transport system, mobility would come to a halt, period. And you can then take that and extrapolate what that means.
When you say ease of living, you're saying that the citizen and the community matters. And whatever you do, you may be doing projects, you may be taking decisions on policy, you may be building infrastructure, you may be building collaborations, partnerships, governance structures, financing, everything has to center around their well-being. And their well-being is not something that the government decides. Their well-being is not something like you and me decide in a forum like this. Their well-being is a collective choice that the community which lives there makes for itself. And governance structures, technology, maybe how you deliver services, everything has to align to make the realization of that aspiration possible. So this is a very broad agenda. It doesn't, it will not get materialized in a year or two, but it's very important to have that agenda right up at the center of the table to say, yes, this is what matters to us the most.
It is going to be a very rapid fire session. Each one of them has exactly 270 seconds to speak. After that, they'll be thrown off stage if they actually cross that limit, or actually just, that's what we're going to do. So we'll start with the first person here, Apurvi Bharatram. In fact, her proud mother is sitting somewhere in the audience. She's already taking pictures and everything, so you know who that person is. So that's where it is. So Apurvi, over to you.
It was actually a personal experience in which I saw someone really close to me, someone in my family, battle depression for over 4 years. And through that, I got to see how it changed her and how it affected everyone around her. So far, we've worked with 7 schools and have administered the survey on over 3,000 children. We've also successfully partnered with NDMC, Children First, the Sleepwell Foundation, and the Labhya Foundation, who have guided us so well throughout this journey. The aim of the Happiness Project is to distribute the survey to as many people who want, so that we can enable educators and managements of schools to guide their children in an extremely informed manner.
मेरा नाम हर्षा दीपक डोंगरे है और मैं महाराष्ट्र के भंडारा जिले से एक चारगांव करके एक विलेज है वहाँ से आई हूँ और मैं ग्रामीण फाउंडेशन के अंडर में ग्रामीण मित्रा बन के काम कर रही हूँ. तो ग्रामीण मित्रा मतलब जो बैंकिंग की सर्विसेज मैं लोगों तक प्रोवाइड करती हूँ, उसके साथ में एग्री का काम करती हूँ, एग्री दोस्त बन के, और वुमेन्स हेल्थ अवेयरनेस के लिए मैं सैनिटरी नैपकिन्स सेल करती हूँ, वो भी घर बैठे. मेरे पास एक स्मार्टफोन है, एक डिवाइस है और कैश, और जिनका मुझे ट्रांजैक्शन करना होता है उनके पास आधार, पासबुक की भी मुझे ज़रूरत नहीं है. तो ये काम मैं घर बैठे कर रही हूँ. पहले तो मैं भी खुद एक डाउट थी कि नहीं ये कैसा है, कैसा होगा, लेकिन मेरा डाउट तो सॉल्व हो गया. फिर लोगों को अपने खुद पर भरोसा करवाना ये भी बहुत मुश्किल था, लेकिन अभी सब मुझ पे भरोसा करते हैं.
Ever since I was very young, I wanted to build things. I wanted to build things that people could use in their day-to-day life. So I taught myself how to code. And I used the help of the world's biggest university, that is YouTube. I taught myself how to code. I taught myself how to build things. And eventually I developed my skills so good that I started giving workshops to people in the 9th grade. And I started by making home automation system, automatic irrigation system. I made many more projects later on. So the first project that I made was IQ. It was for the visually impaired people. So it was a wearable with a camera attached to it. So what it does was, it captured an image, observed, understood, and narrated what is happening in front of the visually impaired. So I took that, I took IQ to one of the leading innovation summit of India. I showcased in their main show, and I didn't know that that summit had many Fortune 500 CEOs and CXOs. So I presented it there. People were very impressed. One of those people was so impressed that he offered me to build solutions for autism in exchange of some monetary amount. This surprised me, that a chairperson of a big organization is putting his faith and telling a 17-year-old to build solutions for autism instead of going to a big corporate. So that led me to an idea to start a solution design company for making products for specially able people.
I would start with Mark. From your perspective, what do you see as the role of policy in enabling innovation in the economy?
Every country has some differences in its resources, but what makes the greatest difference is how you employ your people, how you encourage their innovation, their creativity, because the one unlimited resource is the human mind, and people everywhere have innovative and creative capacity. There are no differences among people in that. There are only differences in the enabling environment. And so it's the job of the government to provide an appropriate enabling environment. That means education is important. That means tax and regulatory policies that at the very least stay out of the way of innovators and don't hamper them unnecessarily, but also encourages them. And finally, property rights, especially intellectual property rights, are the great incentive, but also the great way to protect people's investment.
In our sector as well, innovation is very critical. Innovation, of course, in our sector can be of two types. There is the manufacturing side, where we're looking at the manufacturing of solar panels or wind turbines. And the second really is the execution side, where you actually talk about how these projects are actually built on the ground. As a company, we tend to operate in the middle bucket, which is the execution side. And obviously innovation is critical in our sector as well, as I said. The question is, how well can you actually execute? How much can you get your cost of execution to come down? How can you actually decrease the timeline of execution? So there are many things that you can do.
I think India is well positioned, as mentioned in the generic industry, as the pharmacy of the world on the broader landscape and really the basics of medicine. However, we do need to be thinking about the future, and first and foremost in the intellectual property space, as mentioned by Mark, allowing for innovators to innovate here in India and to protect their inventions, to ultimately commercialize those and address patient needs, but then also on the regulatory space. There is a lot of activity taking place on the regulatory global stage, and one example is the International Council on Harmonization.
We need to create a culture accepting failures in the society. Failed entrepreneurs. Is there any bank who will come up with funding for a failed entrepreneur who will come up with a nice idea? It's not. We don't have that kind of culture or society created. Whereas you go to Western societies, they can bankrupt 10 companies, and he comes up with the 11th idea, which is brilliant, you get funding. But we don't have that kind of culture. So we need to create risk capital to support innovation. That's the big policy change our government should think.
Today, the real greenfield is the knowledge economy, and we haven't yet, on a broad basis, put in effect the rules that will facilitate trade in ideas. And that's the intellectual property rules that Kate and Mark talked about. It's the rules that allow the fungibility of money that my other colleagues talked about the allocation of risk capital to risk-taking activity. You know, we're in an economy, a functioning market where money is fungible, investment's going to flow towards where investors get a return on investment commensurate with risk. In those innovative and creative sectors, the bar is higher. And if there are, you know, if you're imposing on top of the usual business risk, the technical risks of doing something innovative, and additional political risks that the government may not respect your property rights, especially retrospectively, then that investment capital is going to flow elsewhere.
Governance to me is sort of like it reminds you of oxygen. You don't always, as a citizen, measure it. But if it does not exist, or if bad governance exists, or if bad air exists, you realize the air is bad, governance is bad. What I do know is that governance, however measured, has a correlation with economic development or the level of economic development, however measured. It's a correlation, full stop. But I don't really know, and I'm still on the cross-country part of it, I still don't know which way the correlation works. When we talk about governance, we tend to be normative, and therefore we tend to suggest that we ought to improve the level of governance, however defined, because it will increase the level of economic development. So in a normative way, we tend to presume that causation is unidirectional from better governance to higher levels of economic development. Government is a small island in a broader ecosystem. How do you expect suddenly government to become excellent, to become efficient, when rest of society is not? So if we look at that broader issue of governance, India will become better governed if all of us are interested. And if you look at that broader definition of governance, which transcends government, it is becoming better governed because citizens are becoming interested in the states, not the country now, I'm talking about the states, in the states becoming better governed.
I think one of the critical business issues of our time is how should businesses engage in society, how should they engage in social problems, even though they're still businesses. What we have to understand about philanthropy is that there are limits to philanthropy. There's only so much you can give. Like philanthropy, CSR is good. It's a step forward. We should keep doing it. But it, in and of itself, is not going to solve most of the problems that we are talking about. Now, what some of you may know already, but many of you probably don't know, is a couple of years ago, working with Fortune magazine, Mark Kramer and I helped spawn a new list. Fortune is the magazine of lists. You know, the Fortune 500 is the most famous list. But there's now something called the Fortune Change the World list. And these are companies that do well by doing good. That's a simple way of saying that are creating shared value. They're doing something important, it's making a big impact, but it's helping and benefiting and enhancing their profitability and their success. And this is the list for 2019. It's terrific to see an Indian company on that list. Narayana, all of you know, number 33 on the list. On last year's list, Mahindra was number 23. Another Indian company. What I'd like to see is that we need a lot of Indian companies every year on the list. That is going to be a reflection that we've gone beyond CSR. We're thinking very deeply about the impact we can have in business, and that we've started understanding that that's not by getting away from business and being nice or charitable. It's about really doubling down and innovating within our business with these new ideas.
IFC Strategy Award in the category of Petroleum, Chemical and Plastic, presented by Times Network, goes to Shriram Rayons and Mahindra EPC. May I request the team to come on stage and receive the award. In the category of finance, banking and insurance presented by Times Network goes to Arohan Financial Services. Mr. Manoj Kumar, MD, Arohan Financial Services. IFC Strategy Award in the category of construction, real estate and steel presented by Times Network goes to KHS Machinery. IFC Strategy Award in the category of social assistance goes to Grameen Foundation for Social Impact. May I request Mr. Prabhat Lab, CEO Grameen Foundation for Social Impact, to come on stage and receive the award. IFC Strategy Award in the category of Education, Training and Educational Services goes to Hero Mind Mind. May I request team from Hero Mind Mind to please come and receive the award. IFC Strategy Award in the category of Services presented by Times Network goes to Persuasive. May I request Mr. David to please come on stage and receive the award. IFC Strategy Award in the category of Utilities, Electric Gas and Water and Power goes to Janajal.
I want to thank some key supporters of this effort. First, Niti Aayog for supporting the National Competitiveness Forum, a broader agenda, and the Porter Prize. Some key individuals from Niti and from government have been critical to this effort right from the beginning. Dr. Kumar, Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, Amitabh Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, and of course Dr. Vivek Debroy, Chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Ministers. I've had a chance to work with all these people who are remarkable assets to India.